Well, haven't done a video in quite a while. Been quite tied up. Combination of lots and lots of snow to plow and ice to put salt on and things like that. One of the jobs I did was, and I don't know how much video I have, was replacing the case seals in this little Stihl MS193T and replacing the cylinder as well. Couple of comments on this little saw. I like it. I got a few pieces left to finish it off. The primer bulb and a couple of missing screws to hold the pull start on. But of all the top handles that I've worked on, by far this is the easiest one to figure out. So kudos to Stihl on this little saw. I like it. Don't know how it runs yet. We're gonna get the bits and pieces and finish it off and then fire it up and see what it does. But I guess the basics on this saw is this. It is a conventional carburetor with adjuster screws for high speed, low speed, and throttle position. And it has a conventional ignition coil, nothing fancy there. It's a strato saw, sort of like the Husky 450 and 455s and stuff like that. You can see it's pretty much the same layout. You know, clamshell, so you're not going to do any hot rod stuff on it, not really. But it's just really simple to work on. It really is. You know, the quality of the cylinder is pretty typical. You know, nice little saw. That's all I have to say about it. Nice little saw, handy, very simple. The throttle arrangement up here in the handle, that's really simple. You know, very rugged looking as well. I went and got some special tools. Oh, we're not going to talk about that, but look at that. I was able to pull that off. Yeah, these things are really slick. I mean, that motor just slides right in. Obviously, you gotta line up those holes, right? It's got those little buffers right there and over here. And then the oil pump goes over the shaft. There's just one bolt holding that on down in there. But it's interesting because I replaced the whole top end. But I think what they were looking for is those seals. I'll see if I got some pictures I can put in there, but the new seals are radically different than those that came out of it. And that seems like what kicked off the warranty work, is just that scored piston right there. They probably figured from an air leak, huh? So it's got to do top end, piston ring, seals. So I guess right now I'll build it right back up. I think these things are really cool. I'll tell you what, it's a heck of a lot easier to put together than an orange one I did a little while back. Ooh, I did just say that, did I? One thing is they use a lot of that self-tapping technology like Husqvarna does as well. That's a self-tapper, and so is that. Of course, there's the ones on the other end too that are self-tappers. You gotta remember to put the oil pump and make sure the hoses are on. start putting this thing back together. And the other thing is when you slide that motor in, it's easier taking the pulse line and sliding it down through the top and then putting it on the cylinder than trying to stuff it up through the bottom. I'm going to assume the torque on that's like 25, 26, like a Husqvarna of the same size. What a cool little saw. I like this thing. Yeah, I got a couple of those to break down into pieces. So I think we might work on some 372s today, at least one. What else? It's a nice day out. It's cold, but it's a nice day. Look what I found. This is a Farmer Tech 372 style, or 365 style assembly. And I honestly don't know if it's, I don't know if this is a 48 millimeter or a 50 millimeter, even 52 millimeter top end. I really don't know. I don't think it matters, but these darn things can be had for like 120 bucks. And what I want to do with this, I guess this is another project for the day, is see if I can wrap plastic around this and get it to run. And do you know what needs to happen to this darn thing? Is there's so many questions about it, the quality of the crank and all that kind of stuff. I think we're going to wrap plastic around it and send it out to the loggers and let them in it. And let's see how long it lasts. What do you think? You think that'd be fun? Well, there's some subtle differences if you look between the OEM and this. Obviously the lettering, you know. The surface finish is a little bit different. That's a little bit more, it's a little smoother, you know. Things like that groove right there versus that one. That one's a little larger. You know, little details like that. I think the real question is, does it function, you know? Boy, I've got a lot of these cases laying around now from blown up X-torques. You know, I probably should do a separate video on this, but I get a question all the time about whether these Chinese cases will work with the new X-torques, and the answer is no. Of course, that begs the question about what's the real difference between the 372 X-torques and the original editions, and the answer is many. And I have covered in other videos the differences between the top ends, where the X-torque has a completely different cylinder, it's taller, has a different intake, and all that stuff. But I went back and started looking, and I never really pointed out the big difference in the cases. I said it in a couple of the videos where I was splitting cases, but I never really focused on it in a place where people can find it. But here's the big difference. Right here. Those recesses. Let me get a couple of cylinders. So let's start looking at some of the significant differences between the 372 Original Edition that was made until around 2010, and then the X-torq 372s. And I think I've mentioned before where you can take an Original Edition top end and put it on the X-torq cases, but you can't put the X-torq top end on the Original Edition cases. The reason is this. If you look at that recess right there, because the depth of that flange is around 400 thousandths, a little bit less than a half an inch. The X-torques, completely different flange, and they're different. They're more like more than a half an inch, about 510 thousandths. So in order to accommodate that new flange, they had to come up with a different set of cases where there's more recess right there. So there's a little more material in here in order to accommodate that deeper recess, so that when you set the cylinder on the cases, there's enough room to accommodate that flange right there. On the X-torq, if you try to set the X-torq cylinder on old cases, see, it doesn't quite get, you can't quite fit. See how much distance there is there? Now conversely, while the old style sits like that in the old style cases, they also fit. They also fit on the new style cases just fine. And that's why you can use the new style X-torq 372 cases on all the old 372 variants, be it a 365 or a 372. And just to hammer that concept home, here's a new OEM 372 cylinder, the 50 millimeter variant, and that's what it would look like in the old style cases. And this is what it would look like in the new style. And that gap is fine. It's not going to hurt a thing. So fundamentally it's the casting right up in there and the depth of that recess. That's the difference between old style and X-torq cases. How's that? Got that out. Look at this beauty. This is a zig instead of a zag for me. I was out there with Bob at Bob's lawnmower service, and you probably saw that saw that was up on the shelf you wanted to sell. And I had my wish list for the ProMax 700 that I want to build, you know. And as I started getting through it, and the cost was getting towards $150, $160, $170, and I started thinking about my available time. And I started thinking about all the things I don't have on that list that really need to be replaced, like cover, chain brake, and carb kits, and you know, all kinds of things that needed a muffler. $300, $350 for a Bob Johnson built ProMax 700 started looking cheap to me. So I broke down and bought it. You know that? I had to do it. And it's perfect. Let me see if I can get it started. Let me put the camera up here and see what it'll start for us. It's been sitting in my truck now, and it's been rainy and cold and nasty.